I'm now pleased to welcome you back to part 3 of this Kuat Drive Yards series, Gone Sith Edition. First though, I do need to throw in a little bit of a disclaimer here that there are going to be some pretty big fleet fights in part 3, and that's going to come with some problems. Like many other simulation style games, X4 does start to have some serious FPS issues when you start to get into really big fleet fights. And part 3 is going to have some really big fleet fights, some really big ones. To make matters worse, I haven't done myself any favors with some of my game choices and mod choices, which is why there's so many AI stations around, and also all of my carrier ships have like 100 plus small ships inside of them. So some of these fleet fights will have genuinely a couple hundred AI entities running around, which is not good for any game. Also, towards the end of this, there's going to be a change in graphics. That's because I altered one of my anti-aliasing settings. Anyways, back to the Kuat story. One of the more immediate issues to arise from changing my allegiance to Sith was something that had sort of slipped my mind a little bit. You see, because I had the ability to make Titan-class Star Destroyers and the Imperial Ascendancy actually uses them, they elected to order one from me, and so, in that hour or so of production time, I ended up in a bit of a bad spot. You see, I was making an Ascendancy Titan-class in Kuat, and they are now hostile to me. Once a ship starts building, the only way to stop it is to recycle the shipbuilding module making it. And, well, where's the fun in that? So my Manticore 3 moves into position, and upon the Titan leaving its berth, the Manticore 3 in the shipyard proceed to send it back to the afterlife. This doesn't occur without some losses of a couple station modules, but that's ultimately inconsequential. Also, a bit of old business from part 2, I had wanted to make a Sith shipyard in Alderaan with Sith factories producing Sith wares for Sith-style economy. Unfortunately, it had slipped my mind that in order to build Sith economy, I need to already have access to the Sith economy. Now, you may note that Sith space is about halfway across the entire galaxy, with the CSA, NRL, and Mandalorian Deathwatch between me and them. Suffice to say, running several freighters through that space is technically feasible with an escort, but just not really worth it. So the second shipyard ended up just using the normal economic wares that everybody else uses. Anyways, over in Khamener, I began constructing a gate defense station on the gate to Alderaan in order to try and reduce hostile traffic into what would become an industrial system. The CSA apparently took issue with this, and sent a fleet on a roundabout expedition to come up through the south of Khamener to attack. Unfortunately for them, a CSA fleet consisting of a Venator 2, a Servitor variant of Venator, and an acclimated carrier is nowhere near enough to tackle a Titan, Allegiance, and an ISD-2. So, naturally this goes pretty poorly for them. And on the Khamener front, it actually started to become a bit of a hot zone at this point in the campaign. The CSA had turned it into their front line of choice to fight against me, resulting in a fairly steady trickle of capital ships coming around. This turned into a bit of a small disaster when my local Resurgent and MC-75 patrol group, set to automatically defend the sector, decided to try and go toe-to-toe with the CSA Secutor. The Secutor is an XXL-sized ship with a more dedicated carrier role, though it can pack an okay punch as well. It's an old design from back in the Clone Wars. This, weirdly, went disastrously. On paper, their variant of the Secutor should have been lesser or roughly equal to my Resurgent. Unfortunately, in practice, this went really horribly for them. My Resurgent, the Akuriwa, was destroyed. My Titan class, the Kaisom, and its patrol were eventually assigned to attack the Secutor, and the MC-75 accompanying the Resurgent had already been tasked to do so as well. But ultimately, these 4 ships elected to respond extremely slowly, and in the end, the bombers I unleashed from various nearby capital ships are what really did the Secutor in. So, score 1 for the CSA.
Emergency. User death imminent.
Ultimately, though, it was nice to see another defeat happen. That may sound like a weird thing to say, but if it wasn't clear just yet, X4 at this stage of the game can be a little bit unchallenging. So for the extra fun factor, I will happily enjoy that loss. The CSA kept throwing the occasional capital fleet through Commander to try and get an Alderaan, but subsequent attempts weren't as lucky, though my own Titan class did almost destroy my replacement Resurgent, which I was really less than thrilled about. Everyone's showing up all at once. And while I was focused on a massive fleet fight elsewhere, a CSA Praetor tried to blockade run directly into Kuat. Valiant effort, but unwise given the defense stations on both sides. The replacement Resurgent also shows up at the end to help deal a finishing blow, and the Praetor goes back to the CSA afterlife to be reincarnated once again. Whenever a capital ship asks for your input on whether it should flee or fight it out, that means they're dealing with some real stuff. I would call a Mandalorian Deathwatch Sundari flagship fleet with several Kenosi and Keldabi battleships, multiple cruisers, and a mess of fighters and bombers to be some really serious stuff.
I like those odds.
The Executor and Mandator 2 end up in one of the biggest slugfests I've ever witnessed in Star Wars Interworlds with the Dreadnoughts and Battlecruisers mod. This is absolutely a situation where the bomber wings on all of those ships have to come out for sure. The combined force of the bombers and the capital ships make short work of the various Mandalorian capitals, while the Executor gets into a gun duel with the Sundari. Both of the XXLs go down to hull, but the Executor comes out on top, albeit with apparently the total loss of its mostly B-wing bomber main. It can make more, though. Honestly, I wasn't sure how many interesting fights I'd witnessed before finishing my big research project, but we've run through a surprisingly good number of them. If anything, the fights at this stage of the game have been some of the more epic, at least in terms of scale. Over in the Trellin system, the Imperial Ascendancy decided to try and take a whack at me with a Compeller battlecruiser up against my pickled pair of Pellers, plus the Resurgent and its escorts, and the local defense station. The fight was pretty much as short as it was laggy, and a tragic bit of fratricide. Pour one out for our Compeller brother. And maybe you should keep that pouring glass handy, too. Speaking of the Pellers, and the Mandator 3, I'd spent a pretty good chunk of time just resting on my laurels and waiting for my research to advance for my big project, but eventually I will need to start moving my battle lines forward. The system of Trellin had become quite a graveyard, especially seeing as both the New Republic and Imperial Ascendancy had a habit of slamming ships into my gate guards. My Pellers and the Mandator 3 began the usual cleansing campaign to remove various stations present in the system, making room for a second gate defense station on the border of Balassa to head off the Ascendancy incursion. In the meantime, I managed to pull 2 of the 3 blueprints for the Freeport, which is modeled after Cloud City, before it's annihilated by my Pellers. Unfortunately, for some reason I couldn't get the docking module off of the EMP bombs. Not a huge deal, as I mostly wanted the storage spire in the bottom anyways. With that out of the way, the system of Rendili, home of the Rendili Corporation, was the next target. The system of Rendili is a choke point with a connection to Trellin and a connection to the system of Perma, and Perma connects to Coruscant. You see, we're really just preparing for the finishing blow against the New Republic here. During the construction of the Trellin Balassa defense station, the Imperial Ascendancy decided to send a fleet of Star Destroyers headed by a Resurgent class of their own. And although this Ascendancy incursion would be quite short-lived, they did manage to kill the Neutron Star Builder that was responsible for actually producing the station. So I had to go get a new one. A small setback and proof that the Ascendancy cared quite a lot about what I'm doing. During the takeover of Rendili, the Imperial Ascendancy decided to do a major pushback into Trellin and try to smash my Peller duo, as well as the triple ring guard station defending the gate into Balassa. And honestly, this is one of the largest fleets I've seen in a while, again.
Hello there.
At first I thought it was just going to be a trickle in of a small fleet of mostly large ships, maybe a couple XL capitals, but they just kept pouring in through the gate.
This should be like swatting a space fly.
Well, I don't know about that. It was multiple Star Destroyers backed by numerous Ascendancy frigates and fighter support. And the Peller duo was actually being hit with a fleet so substantial that the Compeller, my Gintek, was quickly overwhelmed. The odds just weren't in its favor in a fight of this scale, even with support from the station, the Impeller, and their combined fighter and bomber complements. And speaking of the Ascendancy, in case you're wondering if everything that I do in the remainder of this campaign is going to be interspersed with me dealing with an Ascendancy attack, yes. Yes, it will be. I even had to cut some of them out. So the Manticore 2, which had been stationed alongside the Executor, was retasked to come and assist once the gravity of the situation had become perfectly clear to me. And if this fight had resulted in a loss of both Pellers plus the station, it would have been a genuinely huge blow to my offensive and would have put me in a slightly precarious position over the next 8 hours before my research could come to its fruition. Oh no.
Obliviator class Star Destroyer.
We're taking hits.
Oh, thank God. Oh, thank goodness he's finally here. In the end, the Manticore 2 made it in time to provide a little bit of extra help, and both the Impeller and Station managed to hold their own. Barely.
Danger.
I immediately set to reconstructing the lost Compeller, in addition to a smaller fleet headed by a Titan class I had ordered earlier. In the hour or two for all of that to come out of the shipyard, I'd have to hope that my current ships would be enough. But on the bright side, at least during this epic battle, the Manticore 3 and its escort were able to take over the system of Rendili. This placed Rendili Drive Yards Corporation under my thumb, but much like with Kuat Drive Yards earlier,
Danger.
their new faction relations were set incorrectly due to some bug, making them neutral with basically every faction and hostile with the Sith. And then again, back in Trellin on the Balasa Gate.
I'm just warming up, you pathetic worm!
You'd think that the woes with Ascendancy would be past me. But, oh, if only. If only. Unfortunately, a Titan class and an ISD-1 destroyed the defense station, and so a new, stronger station will be built in its place. But suffice to say, I'm starting to get just a little bit irritated with the Imperial Ascendancy.
Something hit us.
TIE advanced. Danger.
I decided to remake my old prototype Executor since I was running into quite a lot more difficulty than I had initially anticipated, so that will help give me a little bit more breathing room, especially if I continue to expand. And with the Trellin Balasa Gate shored up, the Manticore 2 finally returned to the side of my Executor where it belonged. The two of them operated to stave off attacks from the Mandalorians, who were occasionally poking at it, as well as the CSA who... Wait, I haven't seen them in a while. Oh. Yeah, so the Sith took the corporate sector authority's capital in Cantonica, destroying the wharf and shipyard, and they also appear to be whittling away at their Dreadnought shipyard as well. Their faction rep is now in a random equipment dock near the core worlds. Suffice to say, the CSA are going to have a tough time coming back from this one, while the Sith continuously ram harrowers down their throats. So I'm not expecting to see any more Venators anytime soon. Now, let's talk about my secret research project for a moment. This research project comes in 4 different tiers requiring an astronomical sum of resources in order to make, so much so that I actually had to expand and build some new factories just to keep it going at a consistent pace. Each one of these research steps was several hours of research, overall about 10 hours total. And then there's the build time. running another 7.5 hours of time, making the build alone nearly as long as the time to do the 4 researches to unlock it. So suffice to say, this was a long project and a run that had already racked up over 5 days of game time. This is also the longest run of X4 I think I've ever done, which is actually kind of cool. Anyways, the Eclipse. Empire at War Forces of Corruption fans will be quite familiar with this obsidian behemoth, but let me explain in brief for those who aren't. The Eclipse is an Imperial Dreadnought with a smaller scale super laser inside of it. It's no Death Star, but it attempts to produce a fraction of that power. And it shouldn't go without saying that, for a ship requiring 4 different researches to unlock, it is by far the most powerful ship in the game. It's the superweapon of superweapons in these mods. And I'm going to use it to clean out Coruscant and bring a proper end to the New Republic. Though rather ironically, it seems my biggest blocker to doing so is the Imperial Ascendancy. That's right, they are back again, this time with the Bellator Mark I. Yay. At this point, though, my patience with the Ascendancy is starting to wane, so rather than have the Manticore 3 hold in Rendili to stop any Republic fleets, I've decided to move the Pellars over to Rendili and swap the Manticore 3 over to the Ascendancy Cade. No more Mr. Nice Darth here. And with the additional XXLs in my roster, particularly the newly built Prototype Executor, a good opportunity to cleanse the sector of Brental arose. The Executor, Proto-Executor, and Manticore 2 set about annihilating the local stations, particularly the 5 defense stations that had been accrued by various interested factions. Since the system borders multiple factions, every one of them wanted to try and slap 2 defense stations inside, so that's how we ended up in this situation. Chewing through those stations is hardly a challenge for all of these XXLs. The New Republic fleet, on the other hand, proved a bit more concerning. While the Manticore 2 sat on the gate to Korolog, it was treated to a sudden assault by a fleet of MC-80s and their various X-Wings, B-Wings, and so on. Fortunately, I was able to get my Executor over in time to ensure the Manticore 2's survival, and the fleet perished as its shields began to crack. Suffice to say, though, the New Republic really needs to go. Eventually, though, the time has finally come. The Loch Facale, my Eclipse-class dreadnought, sends its massive ink-black hole into the void. And filled to the brim with some of the greatest fighters and bombers I can get my hands on, TIE Defenders, TIE Scimitars, and Sith TIE Furies, we're ready to make our move upon Coruscant. With Commander no longer being threatened as heavily by the CSA, I decided to retask the Titan-class fleet there to the Eclipse as its escort. This also means that I coincidentally have a fleet in descending size of extremely large triangles ranging from the very large Eclipse to the Titan to the Legions, and then the iconic ISD-1. Over in Coruscant, we're met by some resistance from the New Republic, which is swiftly dispatched by our fleet. However, bombers and various other opponents do start to whittle away at our shields, and when we reach the New Republic wharf to begin our rampage and cut off their supply of proton torpedo-wielding gnats, the combined firepower of the wharf and several Mon Calamari capital ships present managed to bring our shields all the way down. There's no significant consequence to our hull, but it is nonetheless quite a setback.
Exterminated with extreme prejudice.
Danger. We're taking hit. Danger.
And in addition to its super laser, the Eclipse also has a tremendous turret output. In line with its price tag, it will out DPS pretty much any other capital ship. And for the 16-ish hours it took me to make the darn thing, you better believe it has the most hit points and shield hit points too. Shields take a long time to recharge, so in preparation for attacking the anti-capital armed Golan 4 defense platform at the heart of the Coruscant system, I have to wait.
I'll wait right here.
A long time. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like an hour. We're pretty much just hanging out on Coruscant right now. And for some reason, the Allegiance is implanting itself inside of my Eclipse. Not quite sure why they're doing that. Every now and then, some fighters come by from the NRL. Just waiting for the shield to fill up is what's going on right now. Can you not? Just don't tell me you're stuck inside my ship because I can't. The problem is if I get off of the ship, then I don't have a way of. You have got to be kidding me. There we go. Annoying, thank you for that. Anyways. In the meantime, I add a Bellator Mark II to our fleet with a full fighter complement, bolstering our power. Granted, we already have an Eclipse plus the Titan in our fleet, so it's more of a flex than anything. And honestly, the darn thing is about as strong as an Executor, so... After an excruciatingly long wait, the Eclipse fleet pushes forward into the jaws of the Golan 4. Bombers are sent in advance to try and weaken it, which they kind of sort of do a little bit. The main event, however, is the Eclipse Super Laser. Now, thus far, the Super Laser has left me feeling a little bit underwhelmed.
Do it.
So I'm not really expecting a huge... Oh! Oh wow, that's a lot of damage actually. Okay. Apparently the Super Laser is super effective against the Golan 4. Normally this fight would be a terrifying duel that may very well result in the destruction of my Eclipse, and to the Golan's credit, even with the primary section of the station already basically destroyed, it manages to pull me down quite a bit in shield. The Eclipse's Super Laser is just too strong though, so finishing it off ends up being fairly trivial, a bit anticlimactic actually.
Danger.
The next and final stop is the New Republic's Coruscant shipyard. This heavily armed station has its power concentrated across dozens of different defense modules, so lasering it in one go isn't an option here.
We were hit. Shipyard.
We end up blowing the last of our shields and severely struggling to get our other XXLs to do literally anything. Eventually, though, it does crumble into dust, just like the rest of the New Republic has. And with that down, the New Republic has been reduced in effectiveness to a point where it would struggle to offer any real resistance to anybody at this point. Many of their stations and systems have been destroyed or taken, and several of their wharves and shipyards have been lost at this point. And while the temptation certainly did exist to take this run and move it over towards the Ascendancy or the Mandalorians or even the Empire, the conclusion I came to is that at this point I've really fought all of their stuff. I've been the recipient of multiple attacks by Sandaris and Compellers and various other XXL-sized ships that are used by both factions. I went over and I fought the ICG a little bit, and I'm no stranger to the Seculars and Praetors of the Corporate Sector Authority. So attempting to do incursions into the various other faction territories would basically just be a repeat of what I've just done to the NRL, and repeating all of the vast micromanagement that goes into doing that over and over and over again. And as much as I like X4 and SWI and all of that, the endgame can get a little much. So what you've seen now is effectively what there is. All that being said, although this may be the end of this run, this will not be the last run. So as is always the case, if you would like to see more, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, the usual. And if you like what you've seen here, I cannot recommend enough getting X4 and then getting all of its DLCs so that you can get Star Wars Interworlds as well. It is by far one of the funner Star Wars game experiences you can have.